Everyone knows that test drive is not in great shape, but I think people are focusing on the wrong things, and complaining and shitting on the game has become sort of expected from basically everyone who is covering it. So while I think things are obviously not in the best shape, I'd like to shift focus away from the server issues and the game not working and focus on something that is honestly more concerning. Let's go. Alright, real quick before I get into it, I just want to say this video is going to be fairly negative about the game. However, I am an optimistic person and I want you to understand I do not want this game to fail. I would prefer this game actually turn it around and get it going in the right direction because I like more fun games rather than more bad games. Anyways, like I mentioned in the intro, test drive's issues are no secret. Now, I'm not going to defend the game in this video, but I personally, as a gamer, not even as a content creator, but as a gamer, am more frustrated with the team's communication, and to be honest, it's a bigger problem for the team than you might think. Sure, if the game doesn't work, it's a big problem, but their plan is to stick with this game for the next year at least, so surely over that amount of time, they can actually fix their servers and probably most of the bugs that plague it now, much like Cyberpunk did a couple years ago. Their communication, on the other hand, is something that's not easily fixed because it requires either a shift in their marketing strategy or their PR strategy or completely moving the personnel. The person currently tasked with communicating with the community is either bad at their job or handicapped by their bosses or both. And when I say handicapped by their bosses, I mean the dev team or publisher is not allowing them to make certain announcements or trying to control everything that they say. Most of the time, social media managers and community managers are much closer to the communities that play the games, and they know how to deliver bad news in a positive way and set the right expectation for players going forward while also protecting the integrity of the game and the brand. Unfortunately for TDUSC, none of that is happening. And because I'm not close with anyone there, it would be unfair for me to speculate as to why. I can only say it's been terrible. Almost every communication we've received from TDU is late. For example, they'll put the game into a maintenance mode or release a beta without saying anything for 2 to 3 hours, or the start of the season happens with no acknowledgement that people aren't allowed to participate in the solar competition because their game session isn't the current build of the game. Yeah, the very first season of the competition, which includes a new solar pass, the official start of ranked mode, and an exclusive car is up for grabs, started last week, and they waited until yesterday to make an announcement that the team is aware of an issue where the game doesn't allow you to participate in the competition. Some people literally can't even take part in the first season, even though the season is live. And the issue is completely random. It's happened to me a few times, it's happened to my friends a few times. The only quote-unquote fix for it is you can restart your game, and that will sometimes fix the issue and put you on a session that actually has the competition live, but there's really no other way to determine what the issue is, and they didn't say anything about it for like 4 days. It just leaves players in the dark wondering what's going on. But aside from the Discord and the X posts that we've been getting, the dev diary was just so out of touch. The launch of TDU2, which was their previous game, went terribly bad as far as the network goes. So in the context of that, they said, with Solar Crown, things are going better because players can access the game. Which is crazy to say after a launch where literally no one could access the game when it went live. They go on to say some had to try a few times to access the game. Some? A few times? I sat on the title screen at launch for just about 2 hours constantly restarting the game before finally being let in after they restarted their servers and fixed a couple of things on the back end. And I know I wasn't the only one. There were many people streaming that day. It's just an out of touch, minimizing statement. And when you minimize what players are experiencing in order to preserve the image of the game, you're just lying to the community. Obviously, they are trying to do damage control, and they're not admitting what an absolute failure this game was at launch. Now, do I expect them to come right out and say, this game is a failure? Of course not. But a little acknowledgement that literally 90% of the people who were trying to play the game couldn't would be nice. Not this, some players had to try a few times business. Then they referenced the beta phases, which were criticized heavily for not working very well, and said they didn't have as many issues during those phases, and they didn't anticipate having so many players. What do you mean? The game had just as much hype around it as the Crew Motorfest. People were chomping at the bit to get into this game. All of the racing YouTube channels were covering its launch, and because we were told that the beta phases were old builds of the game, we all wanted to see if the game was going to be good. Also, you knew roughly the number of players because the only ones that could access the game during early access were the people who pre-ordered the gold edition. So the number of players really shouldn't have been an excuse in terms of why the servers weren't working. You had multiple beta phases, you knew all of the gold pre-orders, and people weren't pre-ordering the day it launched because it just didn't work. So you knew ahead of time roughly how many players you were going to have to service, and there didn't seem to be any last minute steps taken to mitigate the issues. Anyways, there are a bunch more examples I could pull from that dev diary, but something that really got under my skin was the communication from the quote-unquote week 1 patch, which actually didn't happen week 1. They said that's just an internal name for it, and it was supposed to include 300 plus bug fixes. Before that patch came out, they announced that they were working on a huge patch that included 300 fixes, server improvements, and enhanced graphics, but it didn't detail what the fixes were. The patch notes didn't include any notes. And usually when patch notes are published, there's a long list of bug fixes that are included, and most people just skim through it all. We don't read them all, but all of them are there, and if you wanted to go through and see exactly what they worked on, you can see it. For this one, we didn't get it. And I think it's because the majority of the fixes were back-end things or smaller fixes that the majority of players didn't really notice. Because upon re-entering the game after the update, the game feels exactly the same. I still can't reliably party up with friends, especially not 3 or more players. Ranked mode is dead and only has people at the very top of the leaderboard who are just boosting off friends. Players are still getting disconnected from races and sometimes the game, and the graphics are similar. And I still get very low frame rates on medium and higher graphic settings. And before you go, it's your PC build, I have a decent build. I'm running a 3090 GPU with an i9 processor. So my computer should be more than capable of running the game on medium settings and having it look decent. But to announce something that sounds so big and game changing, and then to have the game feel and look exactly the same, they just keep digging this hole deeper and deeper. And it's not because they didn't fix things. I'm sure they actually did a lot of work behind the scenes to make the game more stable, but they set an expectation that the game was going to be drastically different, and it just wasn't. And that's my entire point with this video. They didn't have to say 300 fixes. They didn't have to say anything. They could have just dropped to the first patch and said, go play the game, we've tried to make some server improvements. And the players could have figured it out on their own. This didn't need to be a marketing PR announcement because it really didn't change the experience. And that's honestly my entire point with this video. The communication has been awful, and they seem to keep setting themselves up for failure. They need a huge change at the PR level in order to turn this thing around, as well as a ton of work on the game itself. And to be honest, I'm not so confident it will happen. I think it really depends on how long Nikon, their publisher, can afford to let them work on the game post-launch without making any money, without selling any more copies, without selling any more battle passes or season passes. The good news is there is a very tiny light at the end of a very long tunnel for this team, and that is that the game's ideas are good. The map is good. The driving grows on you, and the potential for high-level competition is there. They need to put their heads down and work hard on things over the next few months and be super humble when it comes to something they've accomplished. If they fix something in the game, put out a small release saying we fixed this. If they have a maintenance coming up, please let us know ahead of time. I realize that there's not a ton of players actually in the game playing, but if they don't keep those people playing, what makes them think they can actually get more people in the game? They have to be able to do both things. Both announce that there's changes, announce that there's successes, but don't go overboard, saying that there's 300 bug fixes when probably 200 of those fixes are tiny and in the background and insignificant. Just so you can say 300 plus on a press release is just not good for the game because it doesn't set the right expectation. This entire thing is all about setting the right expectation along with fixing the game. If both of those things are not happening, you're just going to be digging a deeper and deeper hole, and I really don't want this for this game. They need a few wins in a row for people to start to get curious about the game again, and I do think it's possible. But again, the money to keep going has to be there, but I'm just not super confident on that at this time. Anyways, thanks for listening to me rant. I really appreciate it, and I hope that TDUSC can turn it around because, like I said earlier, I hate seeing failures in the game industry. I would much rather have good games than bad ones. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will catch you on the next one. Trigger out.